One main conflict in The Graduate is the adults are superior to Ben and he tries to assert himself. His parents' goals supersede his own goals. In the scene where he is in his room with the dartboard, the darts are on the board but none of them are near the bullseye. This shows that what he really wants, a life of his own, has not yet been reached. Ben is shown to be unhappy and disappointed.
What are you going to do now?
I was going to go upstairs for a minute.
Oh, I meant with your future. Your life.
Well, that's a little hard to say.
Ben appears to be drifting a lot in the following scenes, showing that his life is very slow and unproductive. The amount of space he has to think for himself is that of the room he has to breathe within his scuba suit. When Ben is floating on the water, he remains at the foreground of the scene and above the water, while his parents are behind him, treading water to stay afloat, almost as if they are struggling to keep the amount of influence they have on Ben. Within this particular screenshot, you can subtly see Ben's father in the reflection of the water. In a way, it shows how his parents' influence on Ben is slowly fading away as Ben begins to do what he wants to do: drift.
In the Robinsons' house, Mrs. Robinson is sitting down and illuminated by the lights while Ben is left in the dark. Mrs. Robinson is shown to have power over Ben while he is lost and has no power. When Ben is asked to get Mrs. Robinson's purse, he stands at the bottom of the stairs. Because of the composition of the scene, Ben appears small compared to everything else. He is powerless and weak. Though Ben doesn't want to do any of the things Mrs. Robinson asks, he still does it when Mrs. Robinson asserts herself. In the scene in the pool on Ben's birthday, his parents put him in a scuba suit against his wishes. When he wants to come up, his dad pushes him back down. The mask takes up a majority of the screen while his dad's hand covers up the rest. This shows that he is trapped. His parents make up most of the entrapment while other things and people in his life trap him as well.
How about art?
Art? That's a good subject. You started off.
You started off. I don't know anything about it.
You're not interested in art?
No,
Then why do you want to talk about it?
I don't.
What was your major subject at college?
Art.
Within this scene, everything is in the dark, symbolizing that as Mrs. Robinson speaks about art, she is hiding something. She constantly contradicts herself by bringing up the subject of art, then claiming that she knows nothing of it. When Ben asks if she takes an interest in art, she denies it. However, in the next scene when Ben flips a switch, Mrs. Robinson's face is now in the light as if to say that she is revealing the truth, as Ben asks her, "What was your major in college?" And she hesitates before saying reluctantly the truth: art. The lighting also shows how Mrs. Robinson misses art, and her expression conveys a realization of what she had lost. Also, she remains in the foreground because she is the focus of the scene.
When Ben runs to Elaine to explain to her that he had an affair with her mother, Mrs. Robinson has a close-up which then zooms out to a medium shot, in which Mrs. Robinson appears small and Ben appears large. Mrs. Robinson was a figure of power. However, when Ben starts to assert himself and go against his parents and Mrs. Robinson's wishes, she appears vulnerable because of the absence of makeup and her hair is messy. When the camera zooms out, the once powerful Mrs. Robinson exchanges places with Ben, where Ben now has the power and Mrs. Robinson seems hopeless and powerless.
Within the finale, the camera is close up into their faces to focus on their expressions. It's odd because Elaine and Benjamin both lose their smiles and laughter very quickly. If you look closely, there is a point where Ben's eyes even widen a little as he realizes something, most likely the regret Mrs. Robinson has experienced when she lost her love for art by getting pregnant and married too young. By jumping into marriage, he could have easily lost half of his life. Elaine's expression also dies down, and even her eyes widen for a split second, and then she goes on to look at Benjamin as he has his own revelations. She looks at him without a sense of security and happiness, but rather a look of doubt. She doesn't smile when she sees his face. Her expression only mimics Benjamin's. Elaine seems to be thinking that she had sealed her own fate and made it too late for her, as her mother had said, even though she had denied it. The scene then ends as we watch the bus and the back of their heads travel further away from the screen as if to say that whatever they had chosen, life was going to keep moving on.